Sometimes life just isn't fair, especially when great movies don't get the attention they deserve while they're in theaters. From animated adventures to cryptic head-scratchers, these films from the 2000s are worth checking out even though they flopped. Director Cameron Crowe spent the early days of his career as a music journalist for Rolling Stone before he entered the world of film by writing Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Once he had a few movies under his belt, Crowe decided to revisit that era with another semi-autobiographical story, Almost Famous. But unfortunately, people weren't that interested. William Miller is a child prodigy, but he's been sheltered from rock and roll music his whole life. Once his sister teaches him how incredible it can be, he decides to become a music journalist, and before long, he's touring America with the band Stillwater and forming a bond with groupie Penny Lane. Almost Famous got rave reviews and 4 Oscar nominations, including a win for Best Original Screenplay, but presenting it with an award didn't help its box office numbers once it had already left theaters. Despite the presence of big-name actors like Kate Hudson and Philip Seymour Hoffman, it earned $47.4 million on a $60 million budget. That made it the first film directed by Crowe not to earn its budget back. Despite poor box office returns, Almost Famous is an impressive coming-of-age story that still resonates with new viewers today. Disney's animated library was in a golden age during the late 1990s and early 2000s, with films like 1998's Mulan and 1999's Tarzan becoming huge box office successes. Not even The House of Mouse has a 100% success rate, though. Just look at The Emperor's New Groove. You might see countless memes about Kronk pulling the wrong lever nowadays, but people weren't so keen on the film when it first came out. Teenage Emperor Kuzco has an ego the size of the Incan Empire, but he gets knocked down a peg after a botched assassination attempt turns him into a llama. As he works with local leader Pacha to restore his humanity and stop the evil advisor Yzma, he learns that ruling with an iron fist isn't all that it's cracked up to be. After being released in theaters during the holidays in 2000, The Emperor's New Groove vastly underperformed compared to other Disney animated films at the time. It grossed below new releases like What Women Want and Dude, Where's My Car? But the film eventually found later success and cult fame through its home video releases.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
The relative failure of The Emperor's New Groove in theaters was a long time coming, given its troubled production. The film was originally going to be an animated musical with songs composed by Sting, but poor test screenings forced Disney to bring in Mark Dindal to direct and restructure the film as a comedy. Released the same year as The Emperor's New Groove, The Road to El Dorado was another 2D animated adventure movie about an ancient civilization. This time, DreamWorks took inspiration from the Mayan Empire to craft their own version of the mythical City of Gold. Unfortunately, the wealth depicted on screen didn't translate into wealth at the box office. When con artists Tulio and Miguel acquire a map to El Dorado, they journey to the New World in search of endless fortune. However, they soon find the situation to be more than they bargained for when the local people believe them to be gods. The Road to El Dorado had plenty of selling points. Kevin Kline and Kenneth Branagh played Tulio and Miguel, while Elton John and Tim Rice did the music. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough to impress audiences when it was initially released. Reviews were mixed, and the film was criticized by indigenous organizations for its lack of respect for Mesoamerican history. Its box office performance wasn't enough to dethrone Aaron Brockovich, and it continued to slip lower in the following weeks. In more recent years, opinions have swayed regarding The Road to El Dorado. Whether it's a genuinely entertaining adventure or an endless fountain of memes is up to you. The early 2000s simply weren't very good for 2D animated features. Not even the promise of Chris Rock as a crime-fighting white blood cell was enough to get people to see Osmosis Jones in 2001. Zookeeper Frank doesn't seem all that interesting on the surface, but he has a bustling city inside of him that works tirelessly to keep him alive. As a member of the Frank Police Department, it's Osmosis Jones's job to keep germs at bay. But the arrival of a disease called the Red Death means that he's about to face his biggest challenge yet. The box office performance of Osmosis Jones was nothing less than abysmal. With a budget of $70 million, it grossed only $14 million during its theatrical run. Osmosis Jones ended up being one of the last theatrical productions of Warner Brothers feature animation, before the company scaled back its staff and moved its focus to television. Reviews for Osmosis Jones weren't kind either. Particularly, critics weren't fond of the film's sense of humor, with TV Guide calling it a gross-out celebration of bodily fluids and functions that will delight kids of a certain age. If disgusting humor is something you seek out rather than avoid, then you might just want to check out Osmosis Jones. Blockbusters like Bad Boys, Men in Black, and Independence Day made him the movie star he is today, but he made a pivot to a different kind of action movie when he was cast in Michael Mann's 2001 biopic, Ali. Smith plays the title role of Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest boxers in the history of the sport. The film follows the fighter as he claims the heavyweight championship, embraces Islam, speaks out against the war in Vietnam, and faces off against Big George Foreman during the Rumble in the Jungle. Ali was a critical success, although some believed it covered too much ground and didn't do justice to the boxer's story. The film's box office performance was unlike Ali's own performances in the ring, as it failed to gross its total budget. Instead, people were more invested in its release weekend competitors, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Nevertheless, the film remains one of Smith's most iconic and critically acclaimed roles. Despite losing the Academy Award for Best Actor to Denzel Washington in Training Day, Smith served as a pallbearer during the real-life Ali's funeral proceedings in 2016. Even though Smith went on to win a Best Actor Oscar for his role in another sports biopic, King Richard, many still consider Ali to be the superior performance. Nowadays, Donnie Darko is a favorite of misunderstood teenagers everywhere, but back when it first hit theaters, it was a bit more controversial. Jake Gyllenhaal is Donnie Darko, a troubled teenager who meets a humanoid rabbit during a sleepwalking episode and learns that the world is going to end in a month. When he returns home, he finds that a jet engine fell directly onto his bedroom while he was out, and that leads to some fascinating revelations about the nature of time and fate. Donnie Darko premiered in January 2001 at the Sundance Film Festival, where it received glowing reviews that made it one of the most highly anticipated indie films of 2001. Unfortunately, its release in October 2001 was unlucky. Considering that the movie centers around a plane crash, not many people were comfortable watching it so soon after the September 11th terrorist attacks. By the end of its original theatrical run, Donnie Darko only grossed a little under $518,000 against a budget of $6 million. In the years since, however, it's garnered a cult fan base, and after reissues and a director's cut in 2004, the film ended up grossing over $7 million overall. Fans continue to debate the meaning of its ending to this day.
You're weird.
Sorry.
Yeah, that was a compliment.
As far as the films of David Lynch are concerned, Mulholland Drive is one of his most cryptic, surreal, and for lack of a better word, Lynchian. The director's name is synonymous with uncanny dialogue and dreamlike yet ominous visuals, and his 2001 feature definitely fits the bill. Hollywood hopeful Betty Elms moves into her aunt's apartment, only to discover a strange woman with no memory already there. She auditions for a movie, but mysterious forces compel director Adam Kesher to cast a different, no-name actress. It's not long before Betty and her new friend realize that their reality is about to change forever. Lynch was already an Academy Award-nominated director when Mulholland Drive was released, but the film grossed less than $600,000 during its opening weekend and capped off its theatrical run with only $7.2 million. However, it remains one of Lynch's most critically acclaimed films, as well as one of his most divisive. Anyone looking to get into Lynch should definitely check out Mulholland Drive, and then they should do it again, because no one seems to understand it the first time. As always, Lynch has refused to explain the true meaning of the film, making it a truly puzzling but very rewarding watch. Paul Thomas Anderson is one of the most critically acclaimed directors of the past 30 years, even though his movies lose money more often than not. There Will Be Blood and Boogie Nights both managed to triple their budgets at the box office, but Anderson's other projects haven't been so lucky. Not even Punch Drunk Love, which marked a dramatic turn for comedy icon Adam Sandler, managed to recoup its budget. Sandler stars as Barry, a toilet plunger salesman whose mistreatment at the hands of his 7 sisters causes him to fly into frequent fits of rage. Things get even worse once Barry becomes the victim of extortion by the owner and operator of a phone sex hotline. But his budding romance with a mysterious woman is the only thing keeping him afloat. Punch Drunk Love was a major tonal departure from Sandler's previous work, garnering him critical acclaim and a Golden Globe nomination. However, at the box office, it ended up making about $300,000 less than its $25 million budget, maxing out at number 7 total after 3 weeks in theaters. Still, it remains one of Sandler's most beloved dramatic performances, proving him to be capable of more than just slapstick comedy.
I have a love in my life. It makes me stronger than anything you can imagine.
In 2002, Robin Williams decided to get a little serious. He appeared in 3 films that year, 2 of which, 1 Hour Photo and Insomnia, were tense psychological thrillers. As much as he may have wanted to show off his dramatic chops, he couldn't fully escape his comedy roots. The third Williams movie released that year was the offbeat comedy Death to Smoochy, which underperformed dramatically compared to the other films. Williams stars as Rainbow Randolph, a children's TV star whose show gets canceled after his corruption becomes front-page news. When he's replaced by the lovable purple rhino Smoochy, Randolph decides to take down the man in the suit, played by Edward Norton, by any means necessary. What happens next involves the Irish mob, a Nazi rally, and a shocking mascot murder. Danny DeVito directed Death to Smoochy and had a supporting role, but that didn't save it from making just $8.3 million against a $50 million budget. Critics didn't think highly of the film, with Roger Ebert stating, "Only enormously talented people could have made Death to Smoochy. Those with lesser gifts would have lacked the nerve to make a film so bad, so miscalculated, so lacking any connection with any possible audience." That said, if bizarre jokes are your cup of tea, Death to Smoochy might just be the movie for you. The 2000s marked a turning point for big-budget animated features, as America's biggest studios left the world of 2D drawings in favor of 3D CGI. In an attempt to get the best of both worlds, Disney's Treasure Planet attempted to combine the two, and whether or not it was a success depends on who you ask. Treasure Planet reimagines Robert Louis Stevenson's 1883 novel Treasure Island as a space opera, as a young Jim Hawkins teams up with a ragtag group of pirates in search of the long-lost loot of the fabled pirate Captain Flint. Of course, they'll have to contend with all sorts of obstacles in their quest for riches, mostly each other. Though the film received acclaim from critics who praised its trademark Disney charm, Treasure Planet was simply too pricey to be profitable. Its final budget ended up being $140 million, making it the most expensive hand-drawn feature to this day. Treasure Planet's release over Thanksgiving weekend in 2002 was overshadowed by the box office dominance of films like Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets and The Santa Claus 2. And by the end of its run, it had only earned back roughly $110 million. Even though the film came up $30 million short, the real treasure is its stunning depiction of the cosmos.
You're something special, Jim. You're going to rattle the stars, you are.
Disney isn't the only studio that's allowed to adapt Peter Pan. Many have tried, with varying levels of success. The version of the classic tale directed by P.J. Hogan and released in 2003 isn't necessarily groundbreaking, but it deserved better than the lackluster reception it got. Everyone knows the original story of Peter Pan, and this one isn't much different. The magical boy who refuses to grow up, here played by Jeremy Sumpter, whisks young Wendy and her brothers away to the magical realm of Neverland, where they meet characters like the Lost Boys, Tinkerbell, and Captain Hook. Despite the lasting popularity of the Peter Pan story, the 2003 adaptation failed to reach expectations. It only earned back $122 million of its $130 million budget. But it probably would have made more if The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King hadn't been tearing up the box office at the time. Despite its poor performance, the film remains a charming adaptation of a classic children's book with endearing performances and visuals that live up to the magic. Everyone recognizes Wes Anderson's style, but that doesn't mean people always come out to see his new movies when they hit theaters. Anderson had his biggest hit yet in the early 2000s with the bittersweet family comedy The Royal Tenenbaums. But even though he was given double the budget for his next project, it made half as much. That project was 2004's The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, Anderson's loving homage to the oceanographer Jacques Cousteau. Steve Zissou, played by Bill Murray, has devoted his life to exploring the seas alongside his best friend Esteban. When Esteban is tragically eaten by a massive jaguar shark, Zissou makes it his mission to track down and kill the creature with a band of misfits in tow. Being that this is a Wes Anderson movie, those misfits include Willem Dafoe, Cate Blanchett, and Owen Wilson. The all-star cast and unique effects weren't enough to make The Life Aquatic profitable. It only grossed half of its budget domestically after 12 weeks, totaling nearly $35 million internationally against a $50 million budget. Critical response was also divided. Some praised Anderson's visual and comedic style, while others found it off-putting. People have warmed up to The Life Aquatic in the years since, though, and the film was even added to the Criterion Collection. Even though it's not Anderson's finest or most nuanced work, it remains an entertaining piece of his filmography. Mike Judge made a name for himself on television with shows including Beavis and Butthead, King of the Hill, and Silicon Valley. But he hasn't been quite as successful on the big screen. His only profitable theatrical release was Beavis and Butthead Do America, although Office Space at least made back its budget. Idiocracy wasn't so lucky.
Don't want to sound like a d*** or nothing, but it says on your chart that you're f***ed up.
After being kept in hibernation for 500 years, mild-mannered Army librarian Joe wakes up to discover that the world got significantly dumber while he was gone. With the help of his fellow test subject Rita and lawyer Frito, Joe ventures through the moronic future in search of a way back to his own time. Idiocracy didn't perform well at the box office, but this was no accident. Distributor 20th Century Fox made numerous decisions that, in hindsight, seem like they were meant to sabotage its success. Fox opted to not widely release the film, nor did they promote it through trailers or advertisements. The film wasn't even screened for critics, which led some to speculate that Fox was put off by the film's lampooning of large corporations. Nevertheless, Judge's satire was on point, and critics loved the film anyway. It gained popularity through numerous Comedy Central reruns, and it's considered more relevant now than ever before. The mid-2000s marked the start of a major decline for M. Night Shyamalan. The filmmaker rocketed to the A-list after writing and directing The Sixth Sense, and his next movie, Unbreakable, was a respectable follow-up. But by the time 2010 rolled around, he had become a laughingstock thanks to The Last Airbender and The Happening. Some critics asserted that Shyamalan's ego was starting to show, and nowhere is this more evident than in 2006's Lady in the Water. Paul Giamatti plays Cleveland Heap, an apartment superintendent who discovers a sea nymph living in the pool of his building. She tells him that the future rests on the shoulders of one man who's destined to write a book that saves humanity, and that man is played by M. Night Shyamalan. Critics savaged Lady in the Water, mostly for its strange story and Shyamalan's self-insert character. The movie only grossed $72 million on a $70 million budget, but the polarizing filmmaker took it in stride. He told Yahoo Entertainment, "Lady in the Water was the only movie I lost money on, by the way. It was the one movie where I said, I'm not going to think about how to sell it." That freedom of creativity makes Lady in the Water a fascinating watch if you're a fan of any of Shyamalan's other films. When people think of the apocalypse, they usually conjure images of nuclear weapons, natural disasters, or alien invasions, not declining birth rates. That may have made Children of Men a tough sell to theatergoers in 2006, but Alfonso Cuarón's opus has since been reevaluated as a masterpiece. The year is 2027, and no children have been born in the past 18 years. Most of the world has apparently fallen, but Britain remains as a violent police state. When former activist Theo Farron meets a woman who might just hold the key to humanity's future, he must do whatever he can to get her and her unborn baby to safety. Critics heaped praise on Children of Men for its impressive acting, writing, and camera work. As Dana Stevens wrote for Slate, "It's the movie of the millennium because it's about our millennium, with its fractured, fearful politics and random bursts of violence and terror." Massively glowing reviews weren't enough to make general audiences interested in Children of Men, and the Christmastime release probably didn't do it any favors with people hoping for something more festive. It only grossed $70 million at the box office against a budget of $76 million, rendering it a box office bomb. But it's only gotten better with age. The music biopic has long been a popular genre, but things got a little out of hand in the mid-2000s. The films Ray, Walk the Line, Control, La Vie en Rose, and I'm Not There all hit theaters from 2004 to 2007, but the genre calmed down for a few years after that. There's no definitive reason for the decline, but some fans believe that Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, was such an effective parody that it put the entire genre on ice. Walk Hard is a fictional biopic about a musical icon who spanned genres and generations despite lacking a sense of smell. After accidentally cutting his brother in half with a machete, Dewey Cox devotes his life to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, encountering musicians like Elvis and the Beatles in the process.
You're smoking reefers?
Yeah, of course we are. Can't you smell it?
No, Sam. I can't.
Despite its catchy original soundtrack and outstanding lead performance by John C. Reilly, Walk Hard didn't attract audiences during its time in theaters. It only grossed $20.6 million at the box office, an underwhelming amount compared to its budget of $35 million. In the years since, though, it's gained a solid fan base, and nowadays, Dewey Cox is one of the most memorable comedy characters of the 2000s. Adapting anime into live action has proven to be one of the most difficult things that an American filmmaker can possibly attempt. Every so often, we'll see something fun, like Alita, Battle Angel, or Netflix's One Piece, but more often than not, we end up with a Dragon Ball Evolution. When it was announced that Speed Racer would be receiving the live-action treatment, fans of the classic anime had every reason to be apprehensive. But what they got was one of the most inventive and exciting movies of the 21st century. Up-and-coming driver Speed Racer cares about just two things: family and racing. After he's approached for a sponsorship by a shady businessman, he finds himself at the center of a conspiracy with the future of the sport hanging in the balance. The only way for him to stop the bad guys is by doing what he does best: go as fast as humanly possible. Speed Racer was directed by the Wachowskis, who became action movie icons after their 1999 movie The Matrix became a smash hit. Warner Brothers was apparently expecting similar returns in 2008, as Speed Racer received an extensive marketing campaign complete with Happy Meal toys, video games, and Lego sets. Sadly, it disappointed the studio with its box office returns, grossing $93.9 million against a budget of $120 million. Some people were put off by the film's stylized CGI at the time, but it's since become recognized as a uniquely faithful adaptation of the anime classic.
Get off my track!
Much like Peter Pan, A Christmas Carol is a tale that's been told 100 times by many different filmmakers. In 2009, Walt Disney Pictures released their third adaptation of the classic Charles Dickens novel, but it was their first that didn't feature Mickey or the Muppets. It's the standard Christmas Carol story. Crotchety old Ebenezer Scrooge is visited by a series of ghosts that teach him the true meaning of the holiday season. This version of the story was directed by Robert Zemeckis, the man behind Back to the Future and Forrest Gump, and starred Jim Carrey as Ebenezer Scrooge through the use of 3D motion capture. Unfortunately for Zemeckis, these technological innovations ended up hurting the film in the long run at the box office. Though by the end of its international theatrical run, the film had grossed $325 million, topping its budget of $200 million, its initial performance was so underwhelming that the president of Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures Group resigned his post. Nevertheless, 2009's A Christmas Carol remains a stellar adaptation of the classic Christmas tale, even if the animation looks a little uncanny.